Okay, and we're back. A little bit of a break there, including a holiday break. But now Turkey Day's over with, so let's get to the next Web Essentials video. So if you're following along, you still have your Notepad++, and if you captured the same agenda I'm building, you have this agenda in one tab, which I was calling my hot list tab, and then on Terms tab, we can define any additional terms that come up. We have a few left here to define. We just mentioned ECMA and XML. And let me think about from the last video, most of the definitions we were working around were specific HTML elements and the different types of elements and their attributes. So there wasn't a lot of terminology around that discussion, I think, but if something comes up, I need to add it, let me know. To knock these out, ECMA is a scripting standard. So JavaScript runs on ECMA, and different versions of the ECMAScript standard correspond to different versions of the JavaScript. So if I pull my handy Edge web browser out here, I can just look for ECMA, and we should find a Wikipedia article that can help us break this down. International, that's not it. Let's do ECMAScript. There we go. Okay, so it's written out like ECMAScript. So that's probably the first thing I would do is update. The way I wrote it out is I just called it ECMA, which was a little too short. So ECMAScript. And this should be the scripting standard I was referring to. A standard for scripting languages including JavaScript, JScript, and ActionScript. ActionScript is used in Adobe stuff like Macromedia, Adobe Bot Macromedia, so Flash, and that type of thing. I think Director projects could use it as well. But mainly when someone says ECMAScript or ECMAScript standards, they're referring to the JavaScript standard, the specific ECMAScript version that your JavaScript version is based on. Because ECMAScript can be its own scripting standard, and then JavaScript can implement ECMA different standard specifications, if that makes sense. So we don't really need to dig much deeper into it. Other than that, you should understand, though, that as we get into more modern JavaScripting, we might start referring to like ECMA scripting 6 or ECMA 7 as the newer standards come out, like ECMA 6, and things move over to it. That's where you start to see React and Angular and popular JavaScript libraries and frameworks adopt those new standards. It's very modern JavaScripting. So more on that when we get into JavaScript. But that's what it is about. So I could cheat here and just say it's a standard. Just get rid of is a standard for scripting languages, and that's probably enough to go into detail on. So you have a high-level reference for what it is. And then if someone says XML, they're talking about the extensible markup language. This is a way to describe data. Think of it as metadata about data, and also a format for storing and transmitting the data. So you see here XML, extensible markup language and file format for storing, transmitting, and reconstituting data. Web services live on XML. Normally any type of web service will take the data and package it up into XML, and then that's how it'll be transmitted across the wire. And if you can understand HTML tags, then you're going to find XML to be very easy, because it's going to follow the same exact tagging organization. So let's see if we can get a sample set of XML in this Wikipedia. Otherwise, we can go look elsewhere if they don't have a quick sample for us. Ooh, there's a tiny sample here. Yeah, but we might have to go review an actual document to see a better example. But you get a hint of it here, and you can see this is defining the XML version of the document, fairly similar to your doc type in HTML. And then you can see that there's an XML schema here that's opening and closing, specifying what specific version schema they're using for the document. I could probably cheat and just say W3C will give us an XML sample. Let me leave our terms, go back to hot list, and remember these two references we put into here. I'm gonna pull out the W3C schools because it'll cover this as well. That's why it's such a good reference. If I drop into there, the tab we land in is HTML, but I think they do have XML section. See that? So if I drop into there, it's just going to assume we know nothing about XML, and it's going to start very high level with introducing us to XML, just like it did with HTML. That's why this site's pretty good for fundamentals and getting going. And it defines it for you and tells you what it's like, and it mentions the reference to HTML, like I said. And here's a good example of some XML. So if you can understand HTML tagging, these would normally be what HTML tags would look like, but XML isn't used to format documents. I don't want to blow too much time on this. It's used to format data. So what this means is the note data begins here, the note data ends here. By the way, you can make up these tags, these structures for XML with whatever you want. So that literally could have been Mickey Mouse starts here and Mickey Mouse ends here, or whatever. Spider-Man starts here and Spider-Man ends here, if you wanted. Then all this would need to be Spider-Man data in that case. But since this is note, all of this inside of here should be some type of note data. And look, it is. There's a to that begins and ends. There's a from that begins and ends, a heading that begins and ends, and a body that begins and ends. This is starting to sound very HTML-ish right here. But none of this is going to be rendered based on these tags. It's just formatting data that's describing this data so that later on some JavaScript or some other code that picks up this XML file can understand that, oh, I have note data in here, and oh, look, it starts here and it ends here, and oh, look, the note has these children data elements, and I can parse through here and suck the data out of the heading and the body and maybe inject that into my web page. So that's the idea. Enough on that. Gonna go ahead and go back to the agenda because we just finished the terms there. We'll park any other new terms that come up, or I'll try to, in this next session. And the next session is going to be what? So we're on essentials. A, B, C, D was HTML. Let's go ahead and get down here and get the next section created. So that should not be D, that should be E. I'm kind of just making one go on forever though, aren't I? I'll just start a whole new section and call it 2. 2 and no E, and make it it's going to be about CSS. So CSS, hopefully I'm spelling this right. If not, we'll fix it in a minute. And we'll probably have some topics to cover under that. I don't know exactly the specifics, but I can guesstimate. So we're going to have to talk about we'll have to talk about the dot CSS files. We'll have to talk about embedded style declaration in head. And we'll have to talk about inline style spec. Actually, instead of declaration, we'll put it just a spec as well. That's really what it is, your specification. And I think that's it. It's weird to start it with a .css. Style sheet files. What are they? They're CSS files, and now files is redundant, so there we go. That's what A says now. So I'll format this a little more to keep it consistent with what we've had before, and I'm gonna have to scroll down a little bit or change the size of this notepad a little bit. We have a tiny bit more screen real estate we can use here. Okay, so we're going to be working in here. So let's get going. So we're already saying what is CSS? CSS is cascading style sheets, but what does that mean? What is it good for? I avoided the style specifications heavily in the last video. In this video, it's time to get into it. So let's do that. So we're going to go back into our Edge browser, and if you're not already there, we're going to go back to W3C Schools. So if you do the main W3C Schools landing page, you'll land in like this. If you pointed it directly to HTML, you'll land in like this. Either way, we're going to jump to the second section of W3C Schools, CSS. And of course, it's going to try to introduce us to CSS and help us understand from a fundamental level what this is. And so, what is CSS used for? It's the language we use to style a web page. So anytime anybody starts talking about, oh, you need to fix that with style, you need to add styles to your div to control that, you need to add styles to your page or to this element in your page or to control the headers in your page. Anytime they say style, they're referring to CSS. A lot of people just don't specifically refer to the layers of the CSS once they're implementing it, but it's important to understand the layering of the styles in addition to the styles themselves. Otherwise, you won't understand how to control it. So here's the simplest way to think about CSS. CSS will allow you to implement style specifications. Like when I say style, I mean properties of your elements, like their font type, their font color, their background color, their foreground color, their width, their height, their padding, their margin. All of that can be manipulated in style. So you can really shape and transform what a page looks like. There's a lot of style right now in this page that's bringing these different green and blue colors and these different bold and font sizes, and this is positioning and the padding in between where this header is and where these little navigation elements are on the side. It's all done with style specification. Um, and the basic way to start to understand style specification is to start off in an actual full style sheet. So we'll start at the top kind of with the CSS file, which is why I have it listed here first. And then we'll dig down further into doing it in a head section of an HTML document, doing it inline of an element. So this is like embed style in the head of HTML doc, and this is inline, meaning inline style spec at the HTML element level, at the actual element level itself, on that line where the element is, where your div is on that line of the document. But before you do either one of those, you can do an external file called .css, and you can do a style spec in that, and you can start applying that to your entire site or to the entire pages in your site. So let's follow along with the W3C Schools here, but let's also make good use of our VS Code. So the first thing I want us to do is, before we try to work with this CSS sheet here, let's go ahead and get our VS Code open. So if you don't already have VS Code open, go ahead and hit your start button and go out there and launch VS Code. Or if you already have it pinned to your taskbar, we can get to it easily like I do. I would probably just launch it off my taskbar, but of course it is in here if it's installed, which it is. And you may not default to the same view I have, depending on if you've been playing with other stuff. So if you need to, we can assume that you don't have this folder open, and I could just close it. So this is what VS Code might look like, completely empty with no folder open. And if you have the recent web devs, which is in the C workspace, you can just grab it there. If you don't see that on your recent, you could say, well, open folder, and it'll let you go browse. And then you can just go browse to your C drive and find where you put your workspace folder and find where you put your web dev S, which is our web dev essentials, and select that folder. Tell it I want to open that folder, and then you'll be back in the same view. Once you open that folder up, you remember we only created a few things in here. We created an empty images folder, an empty styles folder, a default HTML file, and a hello world JS file. That's all we have in here right now. So styles is the folder we want to make use of now. So if I click on styles, I can either right click and say new file, or I can have styles selected and there's a new file option up here. Either way, it'll take you to the same point. It's going to be like, well, what file do you want? It has no clue. So we can just call this, we'll say global.css and make a CSS file from scratch by simply calling it .css for the file type. So that's now stored in styles, but it has no specification. And we're going to go right back into our W3C school and sheet, and we're just going to take this as the initial specification. So copy, make sure you get all the elements. You see the body opens with the angle bracket and closes, same with the header, same with the paragraph, so make sure you get all the brackets. So you have an opening and closing on all those, copy. If you need to, you could always clean it up over here when you get over here. I'm going to paste it. Well, let me just paste this text. No, just paste. Okay. And because I have a certain theme I'm running, I think I'm running Darkula right now as the theme. That's why the code looks this way. So don't forget about whatever extensions you installed, because you can manage, if you have both Darkula and JetJet, you can manage switching between those here. But that's it. So if we just save this, so I can either try to close it and it'll prompt me to save it, which is the easiest way. Save, yes, it's saved. So that's now this global CSS file. But none of my documents like default HTML know about that file yet. That file's over here in this folder, but it doesn't know how to use any of that because I haven't referenced it yet. So we're just building the initial style spec in this file. That's all we've done. And what we're saying is we're identifying body. So that's going to be an HTML element that we want to impact with a specification here. This angle bracket is a little bit messy. I mean, I would prefer it to be down in the next line and this to get over. Keeping things clean and readable for how you want them to be. I'm going to highlight all this and shift tab to pull everything to the left a little and get this lined up because I'm a bit of a nitpicker when it comes to keeping these things on their own lines and keeping the properties lined up. So let's try to get that all straightened out. Ooh, that was a bad move. Looks good to me. So when we say body, what are we talking about? Well, if you look at the default HTML file, we have a body right here. Might that be what we're talking about in the CSS sheet? Yes, it is. Well, we're also talking about all H1s. We have an H1 specification here, color of white and text align center. By the way, if you have white as your font foreground color like that, and you don't have some kind of background color other than white, so this will have light blue, which will help, but that may not be dark enough. Having a white font is gonna, not work. So keep that in mind. A lot of times, the default font will be black or a dark color, and you'll need that until you change the background color to support a white font. So just pointing that out here. And then down here in the paragraph, we're calling out a paragraph element. So what this style sheet is saying, all the paragraphs should use a font family of Verdana, this specific font type, and the font size of 20 if you're in a paragraph. That's what this says to do. This default HTML won't know how to use this sheet though unless it can get attached and get a reference to it, or unless you put the specific style specifications for these elements directly into the document. So I've made some changes to formatting this, so I'm going to save it. So I'm just going to hit Control S and save. Of course, you could always do that up here. So how we do that? Let's see if W3C shows that as well. That's a style spec. Oh, the try yourself, it'll go ahead and render it for you over here so you can see the background color is light blue. You can see the white font for the heading. So you could play with some of this to mess with it right now. Like if you took the light off of blue and ran that, the background color would change dramatically, right? And if you messed with the text alignment on the header, you could do that and say it's not center, say it's left, and manipulate that. The paragraph's at 20 pixels. You could say, oh, that's too big. We want the pixels for the fonts to be more like, 16. And then you'd be in control of that. So these are the elements down here. The point to showing it all together like this is that this is happening inside the heading section of the document instead of in a CSS file. But we're manipulating it here. In our VS Code, we're going to look at how to link this external CSS sheet into our default HTML file. So let's jump into that, and then we'll come back to the embedded sheet and the inline. Okay, syntax. Let's see where our embedding will be. This is going in on all the syntax on how to specify the elements, which I pretty much just covered with you at a high level and broke down the 3 we were specifying. Selectors will come back to. Okay, how to add. So there's 3 ways to insert CSS into your web documents, your HTML pages. External, which is the one we're building right now, the .css file here, we called it global.css, and we put it in a folder called global.css. We didn't have to. We just chose to name it that. We just chose to put it that. We could have put it in a folder called CSS as those styles if we wanted to. Doesn't matter. Or you can do an internal CSS, which we'll look at after the external, which will be just inside the actual document in the head. Or you can go inline. So let's go with the link first. So notice here's how you do it. How can I link to an external CSS file? Well, you do it, surprise, surprise, in the head section of your document, right where you would do other things for your document, like the title goes in the header, right? Any meta tags you want to put in to show up on search engines for search engine optimization. Anything about the document typically goes in the header. The body are things that you want to render out, like this header content or this paragraph content. But you don't put those in the head section of the document because those are the actual content. This is more like meta. That's where they decided to park the link for the style sheet as well, since it's going to feed style spec to the document and then impact what gets rendered out in the body. It's not really part of the body. It's a specification that the body will use. So header is where it gets loaded. Also head loads before the body. So it's a good idea to have the style sheet in the head so the title and the style sheet can load first before the body loads all of the content. Because if you have a large document, it could take a while to load, and you want to get your styles loaded first, then all the elements that use those styles. If you do it reverse, it can be a weird load. So that's another reason. But here's how you do it. It's easy. It looks like a hyperlink almost. It's a link element with a rel style sheet and an href to the specific location of that CSS file. So let's just copy this so that we have a whole reference to how that works. Go into our VS Code. We already built the style sheet right here, so we can just close this. We have the default HTML right here. If you don't have it open, open it up. And let's find our head section. We already have a title called default page. Let's go right below that tag, and that'll put us in the head just below title, and let's paste. That'll put that link that came from the W3C schools example directly into our head here. The link is correct, the rel is correct, it's a relative style sheet, which is correct, so this specification is fine. But the href, which is what we would normally use to specify a URL for a hyperlink, right? This time we want to link to a CSS file. This right now is wrong because it just says go pull my style.css. If we save this right now, so I'll just do Control S and save the default HTML. So it's definitely saved. If you're not sure, close it. It'll prompt you to save it. Open back up. It's saved. Once you have that saved, we can try to view this in our browser, and we'll see that that's not going to work. For one reason, the name of the file is global.css, but we'll fix that in a second. So with that code in place, if we go ahead and go back into Edge, and I think we went to a C colon workspace before, C colon. Should have a file history here from going into Web Dev Essentials before. But basically you have to navigate in your file system, C workspace, Web Dev, and then that's how you'll get in there. So there's our default page that's loading content here. That's exactly all it has right now. If you change yours to have something different in here, that's what it should be showing. But But you notice it's not getting any style. There's no background, color, nothing that's specified in this sheet is showing up for this page right now, right? So do we have an H1 in the page, by the way? Default. We have an H2. So we don't have the right element. We might need to add style specification for that element as well, or change this to an H1. To keep things simple for now, we'll do that. Just change your H2 to an H1 so that we can hook up to the style specification when we're ready to. So I'm promoting that from being a 2 to a 1. Save that. What else is in our, we're doing a paragraph tag. Do we have one of those in our document? We do, so we're good there. This is paragraph content right now, which we can render and see style apply to, but it's not being applied. And the body, of course, every document is going to have a body background color, so we're not seeing a light blue background color. So none of this is getting applied when we refresh this right now. We just got the H1 because we changed it from H2, but we're not getting style for the H1. So let's fix that. So I think you see where I'm going. First of all, the name's wrong. Our name is global.css. We're trying to get to something called mystyle.css. That doesn't exist in this website directory. So let's go ahead and change this to be, well, it needs to say global. That's what we're using. So we'll save that change. So that's saved to our default HTML. Let's go refresh. What does that get us? Nothing. We're not getting style change there. So this href is not good. We're not giving it enough information. For example, if you look at your website, you'll notice, well, the default is running in the root, which is where this document's running. So it's trying to find global.css right here, like in the same root it's in where hello world.js is. It's expecting it to be right along there. But we have it in a folder called styles, right? And of course, I set it up this way to force you to have to figure out how to set your href for your style sheet. So we need to call that folder out. We need to say you need to look in styles. And look, VS Code is going to try to help you. Oh, do you mean this folder? Yeah, that one. Okay, well then if I look under that folder, I see this one. Yeah, that one. And it will help you build the path. See, now you have a styles global CSS. Not only that, but you built it through the IntelliSense and crawled the directory. In case I did that too fast, I'm going to erase all of it. And if I just go ST, it's already looking at the directory and going, are you saying styles? I am saying styles. Let me put a Y. Oh, STY, are you LES? Are you trying to complete this for style? Yes, that folder right there, please. Well, in that folder, I see these files here. Did you want this? Yeah, I want that file, please. Boom. That's a good path. So if I save that change to the default HTML, now I should have an actual relative path to this file in my website from this document. And I do have a body, I do have an H1, I do have a paragraph. So let's see what happens if we refresh now. Oh my goodness, we're getting style. Now, the way I have things positioned on the screen is going to make it a little harder for me to dev. So maybe if I decide, well, I want to render my page on the right, but I want to code on the left, I could reposition some things on the screen, and I could resize some windows on the screen and get, more of a coding. I could collapse this and not look at the folder structure right now. Just look at the code, and you see what I'm doing. I'm just tweaking this and adjusting it to get a good side-by-side dev setup going. So I've got my browser on one side, and I've got my coding environment, my ID on the other, and something like that. And then what you can do is sit here and go, okay, well, the background color is this light blue. Do we want to keep it that way? I don't know. Maybe we want it to be blue. So if we take the light off and just have blue and save that to the style sheet, then when you refresh this page, hey, it's blue now. So without you going in and now touching the code in here, like that H1, it's picking up a default size for this header here. But you could come in and jack with that. In fact, you can see there's font size down here. So you could just steal this, copy that spec from down here, go up into the H1, go right down below this alignment, paste that line in. You've now got a font size 20px here. If you save that and refresh, that's going to change your H1. It's now probably too small. So then you can say, oh, well, I want it to be much bigger. Maybe I want it to be twice the size 40 px and save that and then refresh. Don't forget about saving, because you can get busy changing a bunch of properties in here, but if you haven't saved it, then when this document tries to reload that, if it doesn't have the latest version saved, you're not going to get that spec. 40 is not bad right now for this H1. And then the content, maybe the content shouldn't be this font type. I could change the font type here if I didn't want to use Verdana. If I wanted to use Times Roman or something else, I could change that here. If I wanted to change its font size, I could do that here. So if 20 isn't even good enough for paragraph content, I wanted 22, for example, I could save that, refresh. That's going to get changed. That wasn't as dramatic of a change. Also, this, if I have a blue like this, or maybe even, let's change this blue to navy. Navy's even darker. Save. White will pop on navy like that. See, that's a bigger pop. So the default's popping great on top of that as white, but the content is not. Also, we're noticing some font differences here. This content's using Verdana right now, and this H1 is not. It's using whatever it's defaulting to. So how about we specify the font one time and get them all to use it, instead of putting a font family here and a font family, here. I'll just take it out of the paragraph, cut it, and hopefully I'm not moving too fast, and I'll move it up into the body. And that'll at least give me a font declared at a body level. I'm doing it at the body because, remember, the body is where you render all of your HTML content. So right now the body is the parent to both H1 and paragraph because it's containing them. Same concept as a div. A body is kind of your ultimate container here because it impacts everything, all these children that are going to be inside of it, all the headers, all the paragraphs, etc., all the images. So it is kind of a good global element to work with. So if I put font family there and save it, and I took it off, I think, paragraph, then if I refresh, we should all be on the same font family. Now, one thing that might be missing is, well, we have white on this header, but we don't have white on the paragraph. Maybe we want global white on everything, or maybe we want to control colors individually on different content. If we do, we can keep it that way. We can control the font color separate and start off saying, well, they're all white because I'm putting both header and paragraph to white. But if we decide later on, well, yeah, the content should stay white, but the actual header should have a slightly different color. So what would they have other than white? I don't know. It could be a different blue or something, but I'll just do something simple and try to go for gold and see how that looks. Save. So there you go. So I'm not going to go much further right now, but I think we've modified this sheet enough to prove that, hey, if you linked it, you picked it up, and then you can modify it, save it, refresh it, you can pick it up. So, if you don't want the header on the center, you could fix that. And then save, make sure you save, and then refresh. And there you go. Now, what's cool about that, doing it in this file here, that's why I named it global, is this file can be linked to your home page, but if you have a bunch of other pages in your site, let me change the window size a little right now, then you can imagine how this would work out, because this page here, I could link to just one sheet and control all of its styles from that one sheet. But I could create more pages in my site. I could have like an about.htm page. I could have, other pages, and we would be able to use the same style specification over there too. So let's prove that real quick. Let's just add a whole new page to our site. So I'm not going to be in the styles folder. I'm going to be up here in the main part, or I think you can right click in this area here and say new file. And then I'm going to, the new file is going to be about.htm. So very similar to our default HTML, but it's about.htm. And then since I started a file from scratch, it's going to start with nothing. So to get it going, I'll go into default and just copy and steal everything. Just copy everything from default, close it, go into about, paste it, and I now have pretty much just a clone of what default was. But since this isn't default, it's about, I'm going to change my title to not be default because that'll be confusing. Make it about. I'm going to change my header to be not default page, about page. And the content's really generic, but I can just say this is actually about content here to make it a little bit more specific too. Then I can just save that. Now, what happens if we go view that page in our site? Still have the browser running over here. It's on default right now. Let's just change default to be about. That page now exists. Hey, look, about has a gold header and background color and styled font colors and family. How did that happen? Oh, well, when we copied about, we also copied this whole document, including this reference right here, right? Which gave it the link to the style sheet. It inherited all of that from that one sheet. And if I break that, say if I cut that out and save it and refresh this, the page will still be there, but it will lose all of its style because you're breaking the link to its style sheet. If I undo that and put it back and save it and refresh it, hey, it's just like the home, but it's not home, it's about. Oh, yeah, that's right. So you have your default home page and you have your about page, and they're all using the same style. So here's the full concept tie-in on this global sheet, and I'll move on. Because it's global, I can now do this. I'll close about, so I have no pages open, just style sheet. Here, I'll even close that. So nothing's open, but we want to do a global change on our site. We want to globally change the background color. Easy. Go into the global CSS. If all of our pages are linked, you could have 100 pages in here right now. We just have 2. But imagine you had a website of 100 pages and you wanted all of their background color to not be navy. You want it to be something else. What else would work good right now? Maybe black. All of our stuff would work on black, I think. So I'll just go black for the background. I'm just making this one line change, just on 3, to this one file, and I'm not touching any HTML pages, nothing up my sleeve. Save that, and then I think you know where I'm going. I can refresh about. It's going to get different style. I can go back to the home or default HTML. It's going to get, I can globally now control. So if I had 100, if I had 1,000 pages in my site and I needed them all to go from navy blue to black and I was using CSS properly, I can do that at this global level. Does that make sense? That is the global part of the specification. So when you're looking in the W3C schools and they're talking about, well, there's 3 ways you can do it. You can do it external. External, think global. Think, I'm going to link pages from their header section to this one file, and I'm going to control hundreds of pages from that one file, their style specification, like their background color, their font family, all from one file. That's powerful. And it keeps the maintenance easy. But what if one of these pages I wanted to be a little bit differently? They were going to inherit this global style, and they're going to get, right now, black is the background font family. They're going to get all this for these elements. But what if there's one page where I want it to be different? For example, what about on about, if I wanted about's background color to not be the global black? I wanted it to be different, but I still wanted to inherit the rest of the styles. This is when the embedded sheet comes in. So when you want to actually have an internal style specification, you embed it into the head section for that document. So let's see if they're going to give us the code for that. Here it is. See this one down here, the example is in an internal CSS. This is when you embed it. The style goes into an open style tag, closed style tag, and you do that inside of the head section. So instead of having the link, well, actually in addition to having the link in this scenario, I want to keep everything that's coming in from global, and I want to just override background color here. Let's say that's what I want to do. Then I would need to have a style specification. I can copy this one. So I'm getting open style, close, and this whole style specification. I'm coming here, I'm in the head, I went down a line below the link, I'm leaving the link there, I'm on the about HTML, and I'm just starting an open style here, and you can see it's a little off tabbed there, it should close right there. So this block is what we're adding. It's got body background color, which I'm going to keep, and it has a header, which I'm going to lose. I don't want to keep that. I'm just interested in the background color for this. I want this one page to have a slightly different style specification. So what do I want the background color on this page to be? I'm going to take it back to the navy and save. So all I've done here is I've allowed About to maintain its link to the global CSS file, which we just covered. And now we're moving down, by the way, in our agenda, we're moving past this A here under style sheets. We're moving into B, the embedded is what we're doing right now on the agenda. So what's going to happen is if I do this right and we go test it in the browser, then what's going to happen is if you're viewing default, you're going to get the default style that we have set up in the global, which the background color is black. But if we go to the About, there it is. Hey, that one doesn't have a black color. Why not? It's linked to the global style sheet, and this is where the cascading rules start to kick in. Yes, this is linked to the global style sheet. You can prove that if you go in and start making changes to these specifications, this guy's going to pick it up because he's linked to that globe. In fact, that's where he's getting all this. If you go look in the code for About, you're not going to see a header style implemented there. You're not going to see anything in here for the paragraph tag either. The only thing that's in here style-wise in this page is it's got a body specification for navy as the background. But everything else is coming from the link style sheet, so that's all still working. But unlike the default page, which is getting 100% of its style from this global CSS, we did an additional specification. We said, well, but on this document, load all that, but also load this. And that conflicts with that because the global says background should be black. And I'm saying, well, it is as I initially loaded it, but now I'm going to override that and make it navy. So when it renders here, I end up with, the navy. And I still keep everything else. And that's how the cascade works. So the closer you are to the elements being impacted, in this case, the elements that are going to be impacted is the whole background of this body. And since I'm specifying that right here in this document, it's only going to impact this document, this About page's body, and make it blue. Navy. And then the home page doesn't have that additional spec. So if we look at it, since it doesn't have that, it's just getting everything from the style, which means it's black. Now, we want to go one level further down. So on the agenda, this is inline is going to be the next level. And let's do that inside of our examples here. So I'll keep picking on the About page, close everything else, make sure all your other pages are closed, your style sheet's closed, go into About, and let's pick out something specific. What do we have? We have an H1 down here in the body on 12, and we have a paragraph tag here on 13. What we can do is let's get some more, well, we don't really need more content, but let's get some more style specification into this document. We have it in the head. Now let's do it inline. So I'm trying to figure out which element I want to pick on. I guess we'll pick on the content. So the paragraph tag, it has an align equals center, and it also has, well, that's all it really has is an attribute of align equals center. I think we can add all the other styles here just by doing inline. So right here in the paragraph tag itself, after the align equals center, I'm going to say style equals, and now it will autocomplete and it'll say quote quote, and it wants you to specify whatever that style is in that quote quote. This paragraph tag is going to start to get big now, so what I'm going to do before we specify the style here is I'm going to return down the clear text and return down the closed paragraph to get this into a block format like this, so that all the content can be inside of it as a child and tabbed over, and we can work on our specification in the style attribute here. So this gives us a little more screen code space. So for this style, let's go ahead and knock out some other properties. Let's conflict with the global. So the global for the paragraph says the color should be white, the font size should be 22. Let's override that. So for color, let's see how, I'm going to move this tab over just so it's in front of the page. Let's see how we can adjust color here. So we're in style, we'll say color. Oh, look, it recognizes that color, colon. What colors do you want to use? Oh, well, maybe I want to use, instead of white, Maybe I want to also go with a yellow or a gold. Ooh, golden rod. Oh, that's an interesting named color. Dark goldenrod. So I went with that. But I could have gone with just gold. But it's color colon and then the named color specification. Um, After that, we can do a semicolon, and then I believe we can do another style specification. Wait a minute. Is it comma and then the next style specification? Make sure I get this right. I'm doing it by hand, and I don't want to lead you down the wrong path. So inline, it's going to be, yeah, semicolon, semicolon. So every time you indicate a new property name and value, you're going to put a semicolon. So my gut was right. And then I started second guessing myself and saying, is there a comma going there? Okay. So that ends that property spec. And then we can do the next one. What's another one we can conflict with from the global? So we're overriding that. Font size is 22. Let's do a different font size here to override that. So right here after the semicolon, I'm just going to say font. And you can see it's coming up already, dash size. There it is, boom. And it already built the colon and the space, and now it's ready to take a new font size. And they're doing smaller, larger instead of actual pixel specs. We'll go with the pixel spec. So global is using 22. So let's go something a little bigger. Oh, I'm running out of some screen real estate there. Let's go a little bigger than 22. So we'll go with 32. 32px. And it's trying to help autocomplete that too. And then we just have this spacing here at the end. We're not going to do more, so I'm just going to close that gap. So basically we have color, colon, semicolon, font dash size, colon, and then 32px. And I don't think it really matters if there's a space here or not. I think it'll work either way. And over here, I think it's just VS Code is rendering and then that space this color for you so you can see it. But that's what it looks like. So we're really, everything we put in is in this style equals, this is our inline style specification. So if someone says, well, go do the style inline, that's the third option. So let's save these. This is changes to the about HTML. We're not changing the global CSS, leaving that alone, only changing it here. This page is now becoming very specific. Unlike the default, which is just taking everything from the linked global CSS, this page has its own embedded for background color now and getting a navy. And now you're about to see this page has its own specific paragraph in the line for just this one element in line of the element, a style specification. So if this is right, we'll see the change. Go back into Edge. If we refresh the default page, it still looks like it does. If we make our way over to the About page, then lo and behold, hey, that doesn't look exactly like the same paragraph on the, yeah, theirs is white in a different size. Ours is the dark, what is it? Dark goldenrod. Sounds like a James Bond named color. And obviously that's that color there. And also notice the font size. We changed the size to 32. So if we go back to default, yeah, see that's small. That's the 22. That's the 32. This now proves that on this about page, we can inherit a global CSS spec from a file we have externally. And we can have an embedded second style specification to override the background color and set it to what we want it to be, navy. But in addition to that, if that's not good enough and we still have specific style requirements for this one real special piece of content right here, you know, this is about special content here, explicitly calling it out as special. If I save that, that's what I got down here is this special content, and it's getting a different font color and different font size because I said so. That is the cascade. So CSS, if you zoom back on it, it's this simple. It's cascading style sheets. It's style sheets. Style sheets. What's that? Oh, I know what that is now, Steve. That's this style specification you did in the CSS file. That's right. Style sheet. And then the other part of the definition is that it's cascading. Well, what does that mean? I know what the style sheet means. What's the cascade? The cascade is the rule of how the rules cascade across the elements. Whoever's closer to the element wins. So That's how it works. You have the global spec, all the pages can get it, and then you have the individual spec at the actual page level, the whole background color is navy. And then you have down to the individual inline, each specific HTML element level. In this case, it was a paragraph tag. And this paragraph tag right here actually got its own little style specification made. We actually went into that line and said, hey, look, you're going to do this to my one paragraph tag here. Everything you see lit up there, when I hover over it, that's what it is impacting, is that content. So that's how it works. If that makes sense to you, all you really got to do to go forward with this CSS technology with your web dev is do more CSS, just like everything else. Use it more, practice it more, go and look at the W3C schools section on CSS more, work your way through these how-tos and try it yourself and get an understanding of some of the some of the different types of specifications you can do, like foreground color. What are some of the other ones they're covering? Here's the cascading order as I described it to you. They have it laid out in here as well. Oh, they talk about comments. So if you're going to build some pretty complex style sheets, you are going to want to know how to comment in the sheet. So here's an example of that. We can copy that comment ourselves, take it back into our VS Code, go into our sheet, and we can go like before the body, home, return down a couple lines. And right here before the body, this is our comment. So we can say, this is our first global CSS file. And save that. That won't change any of the styles in this. It's not going to process any of that. The comment's just for humans to read about this particular style code. And then if we end up with some other special section down here where we have certain divs or whatever that are going to need certain specifications or whatever, and yeah, I said div, so if you wanted to get in messing around with divs, you could easily have that element in here, and you could easily just open a bracket up for that and close a bracket for that, and you could go about formatting whatever specification you wanted for all the divs. So if you wanted all the divs in your site to have a width, and I don't know, set some arbitrary width, 400 pixels is what you wanted, then that would make it to where all the divs were going to have that. And then you could say down here that this is going to be very specific container styles, and do all your container stuff from here down, starting with your divs. Just to give you an idea, because these sheets can get big, so you might be scrolling through. If you're doing all the H1s, H2s, H3s in here, you're doing paragraphs, you're doing italics, you're doing lists, ordered lists, unordered lists, all that stuff in here, it's going to get big. And so you are going to want some comments to be able to delineate stuff out. And of course, when you're doing comments, you can also do what we call flower boxing. You'll see this in code comments a lot, and you'll see it in JavaScript, you'll see it in CSS, you'll see it in HTML. Well, we'll go in and flower box this section out and say it starts here using some asterisks in the comments. So visually you can like scroll down and find this in the page quickly. So that's pretty normal. So I'm going to close and say save. So that all got saved in there. So my global looks like this now because I injected some comments in it. Let's see what else we want to talk about before we wrap this up. We're getting fairly lengthy on the video time. And let's see here. That was really covered all the topics. What else was W3C calling out? All about comments there. All about colors here. This would be a fun section to go play in, by the way. Go play around with the color section so you can learn some of the different named colors, so you can learn some of the hexadecimal system and how we do hexadecimal color codes like this. You can even go do some Googling and learn what the Star Wars hexadecimal color codes are if you want. But yeah, I would play around with at least colors and RGB and hex to get familiar with how those different specs work for colors. They talk about backgrounds in here. You can do more than just background color, by the way. You can do image, as you can see. You can do repeating images. So they've got a light blue on that one. If you try it, hey, it's light blue color, cool. And then other elements, green, light blue, yellow. They're getting a lot of different backgrounds going in that one. And then let's see, they're going to jump into images. Oh, they can do the opacity for transparency. Let's see if they get into an image. Background color. Oh, it has its own section. Duh, background images right there. Click on background image. Come down to this section. They were going to use a paper.gif as their background image. That's an image, not a color. See all that texture you're getting there? It's taking one little image that's been designed to be able to just repeated, and that gives it this background. Then they have other image ones. Bad combination of text and background. So they're giving an example of what not to do, because they have this desert BG desert JPEG. Well, that's a very sandy brown color, so now small black text is not going to work on that. You can kind of see the header, but you definitely can't read this content here. So you're going to have to come up with different style specs for the content, like the headers and the paragraphs, to use this background, which is what they're illustrating. You can do it wrong. Be careful. And then they're back to the paper GIF, but not for the whole document, just for this inline. So yeah, you can do images. You can do repeat on images. You can do borders. You can control all the borders. You control just the bottom or the top. You can have rounded borders. There's dotted, dash, solid, double. Go play with borders. Once you learn how style specification works, it's really just a matter of, and now go play with all the styles, right? Margins. This would be good on a div. If you want to make a box like out of a div instead of just a paragraph, this could have been a div, and you could. Oh, this says it's a div element. Okay, so they are using it here. Okay, so in the example, they did it right. They created a div specification, and they're letting this div here inherit it. You can play around with that, and then you can create more divs inside of the documents, have like 3 or 4 divs in there, and see it apply to all those, because they're doing it all under the divs. So these are all good concepts to run through. As you can see, there's a lot of style. So there's a whole standard section of style here, and then there you get into advanced, like shadows and rounded corners, 3D transformations, and I mean, style applied to JavaScript can do some crazy stuff with your elements. So, but just do the standard style specs for now, because there's plenty in here, and you can get into looking at tables, you can get into looking at lists. There's all kinds of stuff here to look at and play with. So that's what I would recommend, especially with like standard elements like your paragraphs, your headers, your divs. Very popular elements you're going to be working with all the time. They have one about the box model in here. Well, they'll teach you how to lay out divs and pad them and margin them properly, and be able to control your own box layout like this. So they're controlling all of this with style specification. And they have one box here in the center carved out for the content. So this is how you begin templating a site out, where you can have style sheets that set up multiple types of divs and have them all have their layout controlled through style specification. One thing we didn't talk about is classes. I'm wondering if we should jump into classes now, or if it's a little too soon. I'll defer the style classes later. If you want to jump ahead on that, it's in the selectors section. If you want to read up ahead on selectors, I'll cover it for you later, but there are different ways of specifying the selectors for an HTML element to receive its specification. I've been showing you doing it by the element name. So that would be name. But you can also do it by their ID. You can also do it by their class. So if you decide you want to read ahead on the ID selector and read ahead on the class selector. But if you run into any roadblocks there or that's confusing, just back off of it, and I'll get you into ID and class later. because I've only shown you this selector so far as the name of the element. There's other ways to bind style specs to elements. All right, I think I'm going to park it there for now. Let you chew on this CSS section of the W3C. Remember to keep that as a good reference. So we referenced it here. I can easily cheat and say, hey, what would the references be for the CSS section? Well, one of them should definitely be that you put in the W3C CSS landing page. I mean, that's a great reference, even after you've learned it, if you want to come back, because you never really learn 100%. It won't commit to memory anyway. You'll forget some of this. So you'll know it, but you'll forget a detail, and you can just go look it up here. So it's a great reference to start with. It's a great reference to use down the road, just when your memory is fuzzy or you forget a little detail. You can look it up. And then you can probably copy the code and cheat right off of it and put it right in the app you're working on. I do it all the time. So there it is. There's the CSS landing page for that. That's a great reference for style stuff. So definitely going to add that here. All right, I think we'll close this out. This was a pretty good session on CSS, and I hope you have fun playing around with the different specifications and the different levels. Okay, see you in the next one.